we've been running a program for a global company and their service provider over the last 6 months or so. And what we've learned from that is, as well as giving people technical skills and understanding about governance and outsourcing and all those great things, we really needed to focus on behaviour. And what we've encouraged people to do, all our clients, is to hold a mirror up to themselves. So that's what we're going to do. So I hope you're all up for being very honest over the next half hour or so. You'll see on the tables there's some handouts. You might need to share. If you need to share, if one of you can grab a sheet of paper. If you just look at the front sheet, they're stapled together. There's 4 pages. Just want you to look at the front page. Okay? It's headed up Introduction to Transactional Analysis. I've got a couple more here if you need them. So, on your own to start with, before I go into any more detail about the theory or the model or the practice, I'd like you to just complete that front page on your own, honestly. Okay, so there are 5 situations here, and what I want you to do is read each situation, then in the box underneath it, write down very briefly what your reaction would be in each situation. Okay, so if you might need to sort of share, grab a copy. So just that front sheet, those 5 situations, what would your reaction be? If you're spending too much time thinking about it, you're not being honest with yourself. Okay, so this is what's your initial reaction if you were in that situation. We'll just take a couple of minutes to do that. Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. We're going to come back to that page in a little while. Okay, we're going to come back to that page, so you don't need to refer to it for now. What I'm going to do now is take you through the theory of transactional analysis and what it actually means. Some of you will have come across this before. Those of you who haven't will immediately start to recognize the behavior. So, back in the 1950s, there was a guy called Eric Berne, a Swiss guy, who developed this model of what he called the ego states. Has anybody come across that before? Great. Okay, so it's familiar for some of you. 3 different ego states, and he said this is how we behave and how we communicate in the workplace, and each of us tends to have a dominant state, something that comes naturally to us. So I'm going to take you through each of the states, and as I go through them, maybe you want to think about some of the people you work with and see if you can identify any of these behaviours, how people communicate. So the first one is what we call the parent state. Okay, and there are 2 styles of parent. The first is what we call the very controlling, disciplining, restricting parent, the one who says you're right or you're wrong. It's good or it's bad. These are the people, I'm sure you have some clients, some customers who say this, the ones who go, it's never clean in here, or it's always cold in my office. You know people like that? Yet with no evidence whatsoever, but it's always or it's never. They're the people who say, oh, you shouldn't do that. Okay, do you know people like that? Okay, so that's one side of the parent behaviour. The other side is the nurturing, the helpful, the very caring, loving parent-style behaviour. The one who says, oh, what a shame, oh, look after yourself, it'll be fine. Don't worry, I'll do that for you. I hear that a lot from facilities managers. Oh, don't worry, I'll take care of that, leave it with me. And then we wonder why we have such a long to-do list and why we're working 14-hour days. Often it's because we behave in this way to some of the people around us. We want to take care of them, but taking care doesn't necessarily mean taking everything on board and doing their work for them. Because to be honest, if you got paid the salaries of the people whose work you're doing in addition to yours, life would be great, wouldn't it? So again, that's the nurturing side. So we've got the controlling parent and the nurturing parent. Do any of you recognise people you work with in either of those? Any of you perhaps recognise yourselves? I won't ask you to put your hands up. Then we have the child state. Okay, often what we see is when someone behaves in a parent style, the reaction is as a child. So we have the free child, which is very impulsive and creative, googly, I guess I'd use for want of a better term. Now, if we want people to behave in this way, it's for creativity. So if you're having an away day and you want people to come up with great ideas, you want them to play a bit and be undisciplined and creative and impulsive, yeah? But we don't want this day to day in our workplaces because it's really difficult to manage people who behave in this way. The other side is what we call the adapted child, and this is the Well, let me ask you a question first. Any of you have young children, 2, 3, 4 years old? Yeah. Okay, and you know that behaviour you get from them when they fold their arms and stamp their foot? Yeah, that kind of sums this up, the rebellious behaviour. You know, we're being told off, and so we rebel against it, and we stamp our foot and we have tantrums. And there are people in our workplaces who have tantrums, yeah? All the time, and it's worrying and concerning. But these are quite extreme behaviours, but we see them all the time. So we've got the parent and we've got the child, and often one instills the behaviour of the other one. One reacts in the other way. If you've got a rebellious child, and what happens is you then have someone reacting as either the nurturing parent or the controlling parent. Okay, so this is family stuff, but it happens in the workplace. What we actually want to get to is the adult state. Okay, this is where we take all the emotion out of how we behave and how we communicate at work, and we deal purely with facts and logic, common sense, evidence and data. So instead of that person saying, "It's always cold in here," what could they say instead? Yeah, they might say, actually, what I've noticed is at 10 o'clock on a Monday morning, it tends to feel a bit colder here, and that's been for the last 3 weeks. So that's what we're looking for, is some facts, some evidence, rather than the emotional, it's always cold or it never works. This is very much about being mature, about having information, being able to evaluate it, and communicating based on that evidence. And as much as we know this is the right behaviour, we don't always do it, because other people make us feel that way. So when my boss is controlling to me, he makes me feel like a child. Do you hear people say those sorts of things? So yeah. So when you're nasty to me, when you tell me, Adrian, that I was late for the meeting, you actually make me feel really small, and so I'm going to rebel. I'm going to stamp my foot, and actually I'm not going to participate in that meeting. And the danger with that is that we're blaming other people for our own reaction, because actually nobody makes us feel that way. We choose. We choose our reaction. We choose how we feel. So that's a really quick run through of parent, child and adult. And as I said, this is a real snapshot. What I want you to do now with the person next to you is to go back to those handouts. If you turn to the next 2 pages, there are a series of scenarios. Each scenario has 3 different responses. So it has an A, a B and a C. What I'd like you to do with your partner is to decide for each of those A, B and C, is that parent behaviour, child behaviour or adult behaviour? So go through those 6 scenarios. Parent, adult or child. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I hope most of you have got through to the end. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to go through the answers, because it's really important that we start to get a clear understanding of what some of the examples of this type of behaviour are. So let's start with the first one, number 1. So this is 2 colleagues chatting in the lift. One says, when does the development meeting start? So A is tomorrow at 2 o'clock. What sort of communication behaviour is that? Adult, great. Factual, no emotion, brilliant. So that's adult. Tomorrow, Wednesday, normal time. When will you remember?
Parent.
Yeah, could you see I was channeling my mother there? If you meet my mother, please don't ever tell her that I use her as an example. Parent. And C, don't ask me, they never let me know. Yeah, did anybody have anything different for those last 2? Yeah, okay. So yeah, the right answers, because Stuart said you're going to tell us there's never a right answer. Adult, parent and child. We will have a debate on some of these, I'm sure. Number 2, I must stay late tonight to finish the report. A, do you have to leave everything to the last minute? Parent. That's a pity, the rest of us are off to a party. Child. And okay. Adult behaviour, great. Number 3, I hear Mary Brown is being transferred again. A, yes, so I've heard. Yep, great. What else can she expect? Parent. Everyone agree with that? Yeah, could be, couldn't it? I think what's very interesting about this is because this is written rather than spoken, we read it in our own tone of voice. A little bit like emails.
Yes, blank medium.
Yes. So as we read an email, we actually do read it to ourselves, and we read it how we think it should sound, and it's not often as it's intended. So I think you're right. We potentially could read that as a child or a parent. Okay. And C was, I'll be getting her old desk now. Child. Yeah. Great. Okay. Let's move on. Number 4. It would seem that Jane wants your job now. A, I'll take care of her. Child. Yeah. You shouldn't talk about people like that. That's absolutely the parent, isn't it? And what makes you think that? Adult. And adult behaviour is often shown by the amount of questions that people ask. They're asking you to give them the evidence. So it's never clean in here. Well, when was it last not clean in here? Okay, asking for the evidence. So number 5 then, so you're left without asking. A, I'm ashamed to say I did. Parent? Child? So, it's not adult because there's emotion in it. And adult communication has no emotion in it at all. And we're talking about I'm ashamed. So potentially, parent or child, again, depending on the tone of voice.
The opposite to the demanding parent, it was the other example that you showed.
The nurturing parent, yeah. So that could be parent or child. B, don't interfere.
Child.
Yeah, child or parent, again. So, and you'll see, because it's about the conversation that you would overhear, what would happen next will give you an indication of whether it's parent or child. And C is yes. Adult. Great. The last one, number 6, you know laziness breeds mediocrity. Do you know, we use this exercise globally, and trying to explain to Italians who don't speak great English what that means. You know laziness breeds mediocrity was hilarious. We actually had to act it out in the end. Google Translate didn't really work at the time. So, you know laziness breeds mediocrity. A, I always try to do my best. Child or parent, I'm hearing, yeah? Child or parent, I try to do my best. Again, tone of voice. I try to do my best. Potentially is the child. Where did you hear that? Adult. And that coming from you? Or parent. So I think A and C there are interchangeable. But the most important thing to remember is what the adult communication is like, because that's what we want. That's what we want in the workplace. So now that you know a little bit more about that, you go back to your first scenarios. Do you remember you said you wrote down how you would react? What I want you to do now is go back to those 5 reactions, and right beside them is your reaction, parent, adult or child. I'd like you to write that beside them, and then I'd like you to share that with the person sitting next to you. So for each of those 5, were you behaving parent, adult or child? Thanks, guys. It's really interesting when we run sessions like this. You know, most of you have not met each other before, and I always find it fascinating that we are often more willing to share personal information like this with a stranger than we are with people we know, people we work with, people we live with. It's interesting, isn't it? But actually, this is all about holding a mirror up to ourselves and really understanding our behaviour and how we are likely to react. We purposely give you scenarios that are almost nothing to do with work. I talked about the Italians earlier on, that the motorway thing with the Italians, we actually had them drawing what they would do with their hand. Yeah, which is apparently a very Italian reaction to that. So I'm not going to ask any of you to share with the rest of the group unless you particularly want to, but I hope it's given you a little bit of insight and some food for thought about your own behaviour, your own tendencies, and maybe this is the sort of activity you could do with your teams so that you can start to share a little bit more. What's important to remember, and some of you again will have seen this model, the Batari's box, is to understand the impact that we have on other people around us. And it all starts in here with our attitude. Okay, our attitude it's a choice. It's a choice of what's going on in here. I often say that we have voices in our head. Yeah, and that's exactly how people look at me when I realise I need to reframe that phrase. So we have a battle going on quite often in our minds about, you know, the good and the bad, the sort of the devil and the angel voice, if you like. The one that says to me, oh, Liz, you can't get up in front of 100 people and entertain them at the end of the day. And the other voice that goes, yes, of course you can. You know what you're doing. You're okay. It'll be fine. But there's a battle going on, and whichever of those voices wins becomes our attitude that we exhibit in our behaviour. So whatever's going on in here, we exhibit. And our behaviour affects what other people think of us. And what they think affects their behaviour. And it becomes either a virtuous cycle or a vicious cycle. And I think sometimes we forget. So we might go in to run a team meeting or have a client meeting or something like that, going in with our own agenda or our own style of communication, not having given a thought to the other people there and what they need from us, what their style of communication is. Are they parent, child or adult? How do we become more adult in our communication and our behaviour at work? We tend to forget. So I think if there's one piece of advice I'd give to you, it's just take a step back before you go into any situations like that. Hold that mirror up to yourself and think about what you could do differently to have an even more impactful session with the people around you. It's really key.
I think you should have shared that at the beginning, really, since we've all been having this lovely networking thing and we might have done it differently.
Oh, that's interesting. So maybe next time we should do something like this at the start. Okay, that's really interesting. But yes, it is very much about remember the impact you have on other people. So that was a gallop through transactional analysis. I hope it's been helpful, maybe given you some ideas, something you want to continue thinking about. I'm always really interested to have some immediate feedback on what you've taken from the session. So I have this magic ball, and if you have the ball, you can speak. So Stuart, let's start with you. I'm going to pick my first victim. Volunteer, sorry.
Okay.
So just tell us what that...
session?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the person next to me is an absolute child. I just can't help it. I want to make that comment, everyone. No, thank you very much, Liz. One thing that I try to do in the workplace is actually look at all of my staff, and I want them to actually have all of those attributes. I don't want them to just be an adult all the time, because I don't think you get the best out of people. So it's good to actually say we need to behave in those sort of mannerisms. But and again, I'm not trying to say that I knew parent, adult and child. I'm not going to try and make that one out. But I like people to be themselves in the workplace. I like people to be professional in the workplace. I think if you try and stereotype people to do one element, it doesn't work. So from this, it actually gives me a little bit more insight how I can understand how my staff and senior executives work.
Great. Can you choose the next person? Everyone avoids eye contact now. Have you noticed? We're recruiting for the England cricket team. Goodness knows they need some good catchers.
Wembley.
They kick balls there, not catch them.
Sorry. She can't talk unless she's got the ball.
I have to leave the room.
So the lady here in pink. Oh. Thank you.
So, no, first of all, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed the whole day, but this afternoon in particular, you know, there's certainly things that we can take away from here and use in our meetings and you know, learn from it. Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Was anybody surprised at what they came out at? That would like to give us some feedback? Can we throw the ball just here?
I've done a lot of these sort of psychology tests, but I was actually quite surprised when having done the questions in the first place, quickly, like you said, to actually find that it's quite childlike at times. Yeah. And then quite parenty at others as well.
Right.
Well, I would always consider myself quite adult. But in the professional side, you know, the work scenario, yes, adult. But dealing with my husband and dealing with my child, I was straight away.
And do you talk to your husband as if he's a child?
Yeah, well, he is.
I think that's really valid feedback, and often we think we are behaving in an adult way, but if you watch meetings, and this is quite an interesting thing to do, so you'll have the senior person comes into the meeting, everyone sits there and nods and agrees and is terribly uber professional, and yeah, great, we're really up for that, and we all agree to our actions. The senior person leaves the room, and they go, and that's when you realise that it's all fake. You know, they think they're behaving in an adult way, but when you get people rolling their eyes or, what does he know? We see it a lot. And I think what I really want people to do is to behave in a congruent way, to be, you know, whether it's parent, adult or child, to just be honest and not try and pretend to be something you're not. Eric?
I wonder whether it's about being honest or being effective. So what these types of frameworks bring to you is to think about how you can be more effective in communication.
Yeah.
Not so much honesty, because to be honest, some circumstances don't lend.
That's true. Yes, we don't want to be honest all the time, do we?
But you want to be effective all the time.
Yeah. I think effective, and I think also congruent. So I think if you're going to behave in a certain way, then your communication, your behaviour should all say the same message.
I think there's a piece as well about where you are with this, because I think I moved from the UK to the US for 4 years, and I tend to be a bit flippant at times and just, you know, say things just a bit funny and blank. Irony just doesn't work.
No. So again, that's know your audience, isn't it? And know the impact that you're having on them. So if you try something and it doesn't work, maybe you need to try something different. So.
I said to a mother once, oh, he doesn't look much like you, does he? Said that about a baby. She was horrified. She said, well, actually,
Oh gosh. Harvey.
I think perhaps there's an unspoken idea that we should all aspire to be adults, but if the world was full of adults, I mean, it would be boring, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Nothing would happen.
Yeah.
There'd be no change, there'd be no mistakes, there'd be no...
Creativity. I think as Stuart said, you know, there's probably a time and place for the creative child and the controlling parent. You know, you need a controlling parent if there's a fire alarm. You don't want someone to go, oh, right, okay, well, there's a fire alarm, so let's all get together in a very adult way and talk about what we're going to do about this. You want someone to say, right, everybody out. So it's absolutely a time and a place.
Can I ask you a question? Because I wonder, in this model, why you try to get the emotion so fast out of the door?
It's
a very fundamental thing in how we operate.
What we've seen, and particularly when we're looking at collaboration or lack of collaboration, is emotion takes over. So we see people in, for example, in client-supplier relationships, pointing the finger and saying, it's your fault, you're crap. And then the supplier turning around to the client and saying, well, you're crap because every time I want a meeting with you, you haven't got time. It becomes very, very emotional. So what we encourage people to do is, in the first place, to take the emotion out of it, to rebuild the focus on the reason why they're there. Because it's...
Isn't trust an emotion? Isn't it very key to what we do?
Is trust an emotion? I don't know.
Isn't there a strong emotion under trust?
I think that there are sort of 5 or 6 key emotions that we have. Things, yeah, like joy or despair or disdain or things like that. Yeah. I'm not sure. I would say trust is an emotion.
Well, when I trust people, I feel something.
Yeah.
Or I distrust is something else.
Yeah. But when you have this finger pointing and this over-emotional behaviour, I think you really need to take that out to start with to repair. But, yeah, good point. Thank you.
Driving so much of our behaviour.
Yes. Yeah. And we're people, and you know, people are fascinating creatures, aren't they? So we can't label people and put them into boxes as much as we'd like to sometimes. But Ash.
Your experience as well as having done so much work on an international basis, my own personal experience as well, when I'm communicating with people in certain places in Europe, their language is very black and white and can almost be seen to be, I mean, if you're not operating in the same way, can be quite, whoa, what?
Yeah.
You know, you kind of think that you almost feel insulted,
Yes.
but it's not insulting. It's black and white language.
And I think it's understanding that, isn't it, the different culture.
Language perhaps even.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I think goes back to what Jackie was saying about using irony and interesting humour.
I tried to use the term office manager, meaning, you know, like an office manager that you get in law firms or something like that, that does a little bit of everything in China. Oh, the reaction was, can't call them an office manager. It's a bit like saying the floor cleaner. It was a horrible reaction, but it's what they do. We have to find another title for it.
But I think as more and more of us have global roles, it's key, isn't it, to really learn. And even things like the Foreign Office website is fantastic for giving you advice on terminology and humour, everything, you know, what to wear when you're in China. Yes. Sorry?
Do you know what? I bailed out at that point because I thought...
I think we can probably continue these conversations over a glass of wine. Does that sound like a good idea? So thank you so much for your attention. It's the end of the day, but well done, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.